Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for joining today's webinar, What's in the Box? Legal Discovery for Physical Records. We appreciate everyone joining us today. And the first thing I'd like to do is just take a second and introduce our speakers. My name is Shayna Horka, and I work in product marketing here at Gimmal. And I'm joined by our key speaker today, solution architect Tim Butler. And before we get into the presentation, I have just a couple of housekeeping items to go through. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A section on your screen, and we're going to go through as many as we have time for at the end of the presentation. There will be at least one poll question pop up, so please keep an eye out for that. All answers are anonymous, so please feel free to submit your answer without anybody knowing who it was. And as always, if you have any technical difficulties, please let us know so we can assist you. So to kick things off, I have just a couple of slides here to tell you a little bit about Gimmal and how we can help you take control of your information with our suite of solutions. Gimmal is a records, information management, and governance software company that was founded in 2002. Our goal is to help you achieve your information governance goals by providing solutions that balance the value your information provides with the risk it also presents. Whether you're trying to discover information in unstructured data sources, migrate from legacy systems, or comply with policies across multiple repositories, Gimmal can help you achieve your information governance goals. We have a client success team and a global network of partners that deliver solutions in conjunction with our key partners like Microsoft and SAP. Gimmal's family of software products work together to let you create an efficient digital workplace. Our comprehensive solutions include migration, file analysis, electronic and physical records management, and document management for SAP. And for those of you who are not new to our webinars, you might notice a bit of a name change. They are the same products, just with a more simplified name for your convenience. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Tim so he can get started with today's presentation.
All right, thanks, Shayna. Appreciate that, and welcome everybody. I want to reiterate what Shayna said. We're grateful you took some of your time out today to spend it with us. It is a beautiful spring day here on the East Coast. I hope wherever you hearken from, you're experiencing the same awesome weather that we are here. And we wanted to start things off with a poll, and as Shayna did reference, guys, here's the poll in front of you here. We'd appreciate your just giving us a minute of your time, letting us know how you would respond to this first one. How granular is your current file level tracking? You can see the choices in front of you there. Please do take that minute to fill it out. Please use a number 2 pencil. Fill in the complete oval. And when I say pencils down, please put your pencils down. As you're filling this out, guys, I will reference, having been doing this for quite some time now, we'll get into this throughout the rest of the webinar, but it has happened with regularity as we're presenting software solutions to potential clients. I've often heard the question, you mean you can track at the file level? They weren't even aware that that was a possibility. I hope you're not in that category, but let's just see where everybody stands. All right, so here's our results coming back now. How granular is your current file level tracking? Well, actually, guys, I'm surprised. The top answer there, we don't track at the file level at all, 12%. That's actually not reflective of what I've seen over the years. It's usually a higher percentage where folks say, I do not even track at this level. The most predominant answer there, we summarize file contents within a box. That one I'm not shocked at all. We'll actually address that throughout the course of the demo. That is a very common scenario we see. We track individual files. We track individual files and barcode them. Wow, that one too surprises me, only 12%. And then we track both files and the documents within. 2 of you, 8%. For those 2 of you, I would really appreciate it if the 2 of you would just add some additional comments in the chat window there. I'd love to know. It doesn't happen very often that folks do track at the document level. So thank you for answering that. Let's move on. All right, guys. So I know the way that this webinar was advertised, right? It was along the lines of physical or legal discovery, what's in the box. And although that is certainly the prime use case of why this particular webinar might be of interest to you, that, hey, look, when a judge says, or via your corporate lawyers, they say to you as records managers, we need these files, you better be able to get them. And of all the different scenarios that would cause you to go through a physical file discovery process, that's probably the most scary one, right? It's a legal one. But it's certainly not the only case where this happens, right, guys? For those of you who may come from the pharmaceutical or the financial sectors in particular, sometimes it's an auditor, right? Almost as scary as the legal cases, but you've got an auditor who says, hey, I need these files and I want them right now. Sometimes the motivation is because the CEO says so, right? When the big man or the big woman says, hey, I need to know what we got on this stuff, the answer had better be, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, I'll get those delivered to you. And then, of course, sometimes, guys, it's very specific to your particular line of business, to your industry. So there's lots of reasons why you might need to go through this process. It's not just the legal discovery issue itself. Now, in the end, guys, throughout the course of the webinar, here's what we're really going to boil it all down to. This problem or this issue, if you will, of finding physical files when you need to. There are really two hurdles you have to get over to begin to solve that problem. And just trying to give you some context into which you can plug in the rest of what we cover here in the webinar. There's really two things to look at. Number one, and it's kind of subtitled on this page here, it's problems with getting data in. And I'll go through it in some detail via the points throughout the rest of the slide, but that's hurdle number one. If you're going to solve this issue of being able to get your hands on files when you need to, physical files that is, there better be a good strategy in place that you're getting good, structured, searchable data into your system of record, whatever that particular system happens to be. Related to that, and then on the back end of that, is once you've been able to get over that hurdle, there is a second hurdle, of course. Even if you've got the data in to a system, there better be a good way to get the data out, right? Those two things work hand in hand. And so we'll go into some of the details, but really sort of at the 50,000 foot view, if you will, it boils down to those two issues. If you can solve those two, you are well on your way to being able to produce the files when necessary. So let's look at the first hurdle, problems with getting data in. Really, guys, there's a whole lot of things we could have said here, but overall, I've boiled it down to these four subpoints. Number one, insufficient technology platform. It has been the case forever. I've actually been in this industry since the 90s, that the tool that's at your disposal as a records manager is just not sufficient in terms of the technology on which it resides. And more specifically, guys, what I'm referring to here is you're really looking at tools that have been around for a long time, whether they were proprietary, whether they were commercially available to you, but collectively they were sort of known as client server or thick client software. And what that really meant, in plainer English, of course, was that the IT within your organization, if you wanted to roll that solution out so that people could actually put file level data into the system, it required the IT to visit every workstation or every laptop of every user who would utilize that software. And then, of course, when there were patches or upgrades, they had to go through that same routine all over again. It just presented a very challenging technology platform, especially from your IT's perspective, to roll this out to the masses within your organization. Secondly, even when you did that, you often face this other hurdle within this one of you had a non-unified or you had multiple data repositories. And what I mean by that, guys, is you had one system that was intended to store and manage information about your boxes. You might have an entirely separate system that was used to manage and store information about your files. On top of that, there may have been other data repositories, one that housed your record schedule or the individual record series, and then maybe yet another that housed legal holds information. So historically, this has been a challenge to actually get all of the data sets that are necessary for the purpose of managing physical hard copy records into a single repository so that you go to one place for the source of truth and can get the data you need when you need to. Third, insufficient configuration of repositories. So even if you get over those first two hurdles and you've got a reasonable technology platform and you've got a unified system for all of your data, sometimes the flexibility, guys, of these various systems that have been on the market for a long time, they were limited. They were frankly an off-the-shelf sort of one-size-fits-all variety, and they would be able to give you a system, for example, that would track both boxes and files in the same system and maybe the retention schedule as well. But they were very limited in terms of being able to use your lingo or speak your language. It made it difficult, right, to roll this out to the masses when you were asking end users to utilize fields that were named user-defined 1 or user-defined 2. So there's been this struggle, right, to get a system that's available to everybody in language that they understand. And then finally, under this heading of traditional challenges, getting data in that you'll eventually be able to use, often you face the hurdle of insufficient security capabilities. And really, guys, we'll look at a couple examples later, but more or less what this boils down to is that you may have a system that you can roll out to the masses, but it's limited in that if you were to do that, it would mean things like, hey, the guys in Department X can now see the records that belong to Department Y and vice versa. And usually, right, we just can't have that. So all of these taken together over the years have produced this resistance, made it difficult to actually get a system in place that gets you over all of these hurdles, again, centered around getting good, structured, meaningful data in. And for our webinar today, we're focused on files, getting data in for files in the proper fashion. Now, on the back end of that, hurdle number 2, when it's time to actually, something comes up, be it that legal discovery problem or an audit or what have you, and you've got a system in place and everything's working wonderfully, and now someone actually says to you, Mr. or Mrs. Records Manager, get me those physical files. I need those. Your task becomes, okay, let me use my tool and let me go use the metadata in that tool to locate where those physical files are, gather them, and get them to the person who's requesting. Historically, similar to getting good data in, there have been issues with getting good data out. I've broken these into 3 different subcategories here, guys. Number 1 is insufficient searching of the repository. So let's assume, right, that you actually have a great repository. You've crossed all those hurdles for getting good structured data in, but now it's time to actually search. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this over the years. Things like, Tim, I've got all the data, but I just am not able to search it. It could be anything from, it's just too slow, right? We have so much data in there. There's millions of records. I try to do a search and it times out, or I sit there and I let the search run. And maybe if I'm lucky in the morning when I come back, I'm seeing the search results that I have. Sort of related to that, sometimes the issue is not so much performance related, but often it's along the lines of, well, I put all this data in, why can't I search by it? More times than I can really count, I've heard clients tell me, Tim, I know the data's in there, but there's no way to search. And what that really boils down to is you're not always, via some of these commercially available products, to search every single metadata field. And sometimes in your day-to-day operations, that might not be a big deal. But when it comes to legal discovery, that often can indeed be a very big deal. And then, guys, this third one on the page here, it doesn't really fit in here exactly, but I needed to mention it somewhere. And I like to refer to this as one of the components of it's the AM radio, right, of records management. And really, in a lot of regards, that's what physical records management is. It's been around forever. It predates the FM and the XM and the streaming and all the other ways of communicating information, but it's still with us. And that will certainly continue to be the case with physical records. Well, one small component of that is you need to have a system that is very seamlessly able to produce the type of labels that you need, whether that's at the box level or the file level or even at the document level. And we'll do a little example of this later, but I wanted to throw it into the mix right here, that in terms of getting data out of the system, this is certainly one component of that. All right, so we've kind of quickly there, guys, described the overall, what are the issues, what are the hurdles you have to get through in order to be successful in this file discovery process. Let's spend a few moments here talking about what's the solution. How do you address the issues that we have brought up? Now, a number of points to make here, guys, and we'll go through it relatively quickly. Of course, I think Shana did mention this is being recorded. You can refer back to it, of course, but at a high level, good for you to know what we're about to cover here. Number one, in terms of the application itself, the tool that you wind up utilizing for the management of your physical hard copy records, make sure, guys, that you are procuring a contemporary solution. I think this goes without saying, right? But it's actually quite surprising how many offerings, how many solutions still on the market today are not what would be called a browser-based or a thin client application. Now, in plainer English, for those of you that are not technical, what we're really talking about here is whatever solution you procure, make sure that for the end users in particular, all they need to access the software is a browser and a login. If they have those things, they have everything they need to access the software itself. Indeed, Gimmal Physical is indeed just that. It is a 100% thin client application that just requires a browser. Along those lines, guys, and as a quick little sub point, question your vendors who present solutions to you. Is the solution browser agnostic? That is, if you've got personnel still using Internet Explorer, i.e., does it support IE? Does it support Edge? Does it support Chrome? Does it support Firefox? And if you've got employees drinking from the Apple Kool-Aid and they say, I've got to use Safari, does it indeed support Safari? So ask that basic question. Is this solution, is it browser agnostic itself? Moving on here, guys, I want to talk about some other details about the solution that will help you solve the issue at hand. It needs to be really flexible, guys, if you want the best chance of finding files when you need to. Things like, and we'll get into more details as we go through subsequent slides, but things like, as you're seeing circled here, does it provide a unified view? That is, you'll notice if you're paying real close attention in the upper left here, right? In this application, Gimmal Physical, I happen to be focused on the boxes tab. I'm looking at information specific to boxes. But while doing that, can I quickly and easily drill down to files within that box? And vice versa, right? If I happen to be on the Files tab itself, do I have those convenient, easy to use links that give me visibility back into the containers that those files are within, in this case, the boxes? Some other really important points that I want to note here, guys. So I'm going to give you a couple slides rolled into one here. We're going to look at this first one here. What we're really talking about is two different perspectives into the software, because that's always the case, right? In your organization, you as records managers, you're going to have visibility into the software across the enterprise, and it needs to support your ability to do that. Whereas for other users of the software, the end users, the departmental users, you want them to have access, but you don't want them seeing everything that you see. So for example here, in the application, this top portion of the slide is really kind of reflecting what a records manager would see. When they're on the boxes tab, for example, they're going to see every tab in the application, be it for boxes, be it for files or users or shelves or what have you. And they're also going to see, generally speaking, all of the data that's available. In our demo example here, our webinar example, you'll notice the little orange underline. There's 29,484 boxes. Now, what's circled here in terms of the business unit, although this particular screenshot happens to reflect just records management boxes, actually, if we had time to go through it all, you'd see that records managers can see boxes regardless of which business unit they belong to. And then also, of course, you want records managers, and they're like to have full visibility into where something is. So we've got some examples here of boxes where this could be files as well that are checked out to Brian Smith or to Phoebe Drake, or others that are actually over at the offsite vendor, in this case, Iron Mountain. So a single browser-based application that varies its view based upon security settings within the software. Now, to try to make this a little more concrete, let's bring up perspective or user number 2, same application, but a number of things you'll notice right away that are different. This end user, when he logs in, he or she, they're only seeing 3 tabs because you've configured security. They don't need to see all the other tabs in the application, right? What they do is focused on boxes and files and which buildings they happen to be in, just to pick an example. So the number of tabs is greatly reduced. You'll notice the number of boxes they can actually retrieve is greatly reduced, right? Because if I'm working on information technology, I don't need to see records management boxes, or I don't need to see accounting boxes, or so on and so forth. I only need to see and work with the boxes that are germane to what I do. And then, as we just mentioned there, if you look at the business unit, they're only going to see boxes related to information technology. And then again, related to where boxes are, generally speaking, you do not want end users having the ability to know where a box is when it's checked out. They can certainly know where it is when it's in the central repository. So ask those kinds of questions. What are the capabilities? What is the flexibility available to me when it comes to setting up the system for different roles of users? Guys, there's one quick sub point to all that. Often you'll have this, and I'm going to get a little bit more granular here on you. So it goes without saying that your solution needs to be able to support visibility into boxes and files, and maybe lots of other things as well. We didn't show it in the last screenshot, but you may have a situation where you've got a vault full of microfilm, right? And that being maybe an entirely separate tab in your application. Ask your vendor, can we track microfilm? And if we can, are we limited to 5 or 6 fields, or can we build that tab or that screen out the way we want? Under that sort of general heading, guys, again, at one level deeper is this type of ability. Now, we call it conditional field display, but really it means this. If you're setting up a system that is tracking at the file level, can you have varying metadata based upon the type of file? So in the top screenshot, right, if it's accounts payable, can I have fields of information that are specific to accounts payable? Things like vendor name, invoice amount, invoice date, and then a couple of more generic fields like volume and notes. Whereas if I'm in human resources, what do I care about vendor name and the like? I want the fields that I need. First name, last name. So make sure that your solution supports something like conditional field display, where you can vary the metadata based upon the subtype of record that's in question. Now, I think it goes without saying, if you're part of an organization that's of any size whatsoever, generally speaking, you're going to be housing records with an offsite vendor. Iron Mountain, of course, is the big name in that sector. So don't forget about that. Remember, one of the overall goals of having a system that you can use for discovery purposes is having all these repositories unified one way or another. So ask the question, can we integrate with an offsite vendor like Iron Mountain? All right, now guys, getting data out, right? The second half of this equation, all that stuff so far is built around or centered around good architecture so you can get good data in. Let's spend just a quick few minutes here, guys, on being able to get data out. Let's talk about searching. Very common, right? Everyone's familiar with searching, but let's just dig in a little bit more detail. At the very top here is sort of the traditional way of searching, which is known generically as QBE, or query by example. It's the kind of thing here in the example presented on the slide that, hey, if I'm looking for records, I can say the business unit is information technology, the retention schedule is IT 140, it's somewhere from around June 1st of 2003, and it's over at Iron Mountain, right? You can put in multiple pieces of data to qualify or filter your search to get down to the records that you're looking for. So ask those detailed questions. Tell me about your capability of querying field by field or using QBE. Option 2, now presented on the slide, full text search, right? I call this the Google of searching, really intended for those users that don't even know which field to begin their search in. Like Google, you just say, you know what, Google, you figure it out. I'm going to put in Chinese restaurants that deliver. You can do that, and Google does the hard work. Same basic idea here. In this case, I've just put in my last name, Butler. I'm saying software, go find any records, regardless of which field that data resides in. In this case, 86 records. And then finally, skipping over a bunch of other possible ways of searching, which include things like, keyword searching, duplicate searching, detailed searching, and some other options. Inquire about the advanced query capability of the solution that you're looking at. Does it support the different comparison operators, the greater thans, the less thans, the ins, the betweens? Does it support the logical or Boolean operators of and or not, and that kind of thing? And then if you're really into this thing, you'll see at the bottom of this third screenshot, it actually is showing you the underlying what's known as the SQL, or the structured query language that's going to be executed against the database itself. So inquire, right? Because depending upon the exact details, one or more of these search options may be really important to you for legal discovery purposes. And then finally, guys, for searching, one more really important one to mention here, a really nice feature offered in Gimmal Physical, but check your other vendors as well if they offer this feature, that is called range searching. And this really reflects back to our first poll, guys, where you kind of, you do a summary of what's inside the box. This is one example of that, focusing your attention on the from through date, which is circled. And then right above it, you'll see what was actually searched here is, hey, software, I want all the boxes, but I'm looking for a file that's from somewhere around June 1st of 1998. Really nice feature here. You'll note, of course, that that exact date was never perhaps entered into the software, but the software is smart enough to know that for these boxes, at least, the range that was entered encompasses the date that you're looking for. And by the way, guys, this range searching should be able to work with a date-based range, a numeric-based range, or an alpha-based range. Again, when you look at a cost-benefit analysis, sometimes this is indeed the way to go for file discovery. That is, don't take all the time to itemize every file. Simply summarize the files with a mechanism like this. And of course, guys, in terms of getting data out, take the time to inquire about the reporting capabilities from your software vendor or their solution. Do they support ad hoc reporting, CSVs, exports, HTML-based reporting, or do they present these more formal type reports? Here, of course, is just one example of that. And then finally, guys, our last slide before I turn things back over to Shayna. I mentioned this earlier, make sure, right, especially when it comes to physical records management and for discovery purposes, wouldn't it be nice, right, if you're walking through a warehouse or you're walking through a central file room, just from the information on the label, you can pretty much figure out what's inside the file or the box and save you a lot of time. This all boils down to make sure that you can print, be they black and white or be they color-coded end labels, excuse me. They can be printed seamlessly from the software directly to any printer that's available, be they a sheet-fed printer or be they a one-up type printer, available from manufacturers like Dymo and Zebra, what have you. Make your life easier. So again, guys, in summary, make sure you've got a system in place that lets you get structured, meaningful data in at the file level. And then when it's time to do that discovery, you've got the tools within that software that allow you to retrieve the data necessary to go find those physical files. So with that, guys, again, I appreciate your time on this beautiful day. I hope you've had a chance to enter some comments. We do have one more poll question for you. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Shayna and then let her address any questions that have come up throughout the course of the webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So remind you to just put in some questions in the Q&A if any pop up. We have some here, but to be respectful of time, we're probably only going to go through a couple. And if we don't get to your poll question, we will follow up via email. Right there on the screen, Tim mentioned, the components of a contemporary solution to aid in legal discovery or really discovery of any kind when it comes to physical records management. If you would like a demonstration of Gimmal Physical, Physical, which are the screenshots that he showed in today's presentation. Just please take a second and fill out the poll. If not, there is a no option. But with that, again, to be respectful of time, I'm going to go ahead and jump into some Q&A. So Tim, the first question we have here is, can you track to the shelf level or just at the location level?
Yeah, great question, guys. Really, with Gimmal Physical, you can track to any level whatsoever. It's very common to track to the shelf level, but sometimes you're actually tracking even more granularly than that, in that you may track to bins or to pallets on shelves, especially in a warehouse situation.
And the next one, how much flexibility is there concerning the file folder labels?
Yeah, and we briefly addressed that, guys, but it all sums up in this, that any data within the software can be printed onto the label. The label can be any size whatsoever, and that information can be presented in any position on the label, and then you print it to any available printer available to your computer.
And then the last one we're going to go through, it looks like actually somebody raised a hand. So we actually don't have the ability to unmute you because there are so many participants. But if you have a question, if you could just fill it out in either the chat or the Q&A, and then we'll get to it. But in the meantime, the next one we have is, do you support RFID tracking of files?
Yeah, guys, barcodes are ubiquitous, been around forever, but Gimmal Physical also does support the use of RFID. Would love to discuss that with you. They're in the right situation, they can be super helpful. In the wrong situation, you're basically wasting your money. But the quick answer is yes, it does support RFID.
Wonderful. So with that, Tim, if you could go on to the next slide. If anybody has any more questions, our contact information right there on the screen, or you can simply visit us or email info@gimmal.com. For those of you who are interested in the recording of today's webinar, we send them out via email in the form of a thank you email. So please keep an eye out for that if you'd like to view the recording. We'd also hope to see you for our webinar next week on SharePoint best practices. But thank you for joining today's webinar, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.